Picture this, a battlefield, dust swirling, the clash of steel, cries of wounded warriors. Right there, in the thick of it, that's where we find Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, paralyzed by doubt, right on the edge of this massive battle.
Yeah. And in our Heart Sutra series, we've been going along with him on this journey, haven't we? Following all the little details, the philosophy, the wisdom that Krishna, his charioteer, and divine guide reveals.
Exactly. And in this episode, we're really diving into a crucial moment. It's chapter 4, Karma Yoga Action in Krishna Consciousness. This is where Krishna really gets into the nitty-gritty of action, duty, and the path to liberation.
Oh, absolutely. See, in the earlier chapters, we saw Arjuna struggling, really wrestling with this immense grief. Just the thought of fighting his own family, it's heavy stuff. He even thinks about giving up everything, his duty, his kingdom, just to escape the bloodshed that's coming.
It's intense. He says, and this is a direct quote, by the way, "I would even give up an unrivaled kingdom on the earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven." That's from chapter 2, verse 8, if you're following along, talk about inner turmoil.
Absolutely. It's raw. But what gets me is how Krishna reacts to all this. Initially, he kind of scolds Arjuna, calls him out for this unmanly despair, and says his compassion is misplaced. You can really feel the tension in chapter 2, verse 2, where Krishna says, "While speaking learned words, you are grieving for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead."
Yeah, knowing how compassionate Krishna is, it does feel a bit jarring. Makes you wonder if there's something more to it, a deeper message beneath those seemingly harsh words.
That's a good point. It's easy to kind of misinterpret Krishna's first reaction. But if you take a step back, look at the bigger picture, it becomes clearer. He's challenging Arjuna's understanding, like his limited view of life and death.
So is he basically saying, get a grip, dude? There's a bigger picture here you're missing.
Well, maybe not exactly in those words, haha. But he does start to unveil this concept of the eternal soul, the Atman. He explains that the soul isn't touched by the death of the physical body, like it's not affected. In chapter 2, verse 12, he tells Arjuna, "For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain."
Mind-blowing, right?
So according to Krishna, death isn't the end. It's more like a transition.
Exactly, a transition. And Krishna uses these really vivid images to get this point across. He compares the soul to a passenger riding in a chariot, which is like the body. He says, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. That's chapter 2, verse 13.
Okay, so if the soul just keeps going, what's the point of all the agonizing over the death of the body? That's the big question Krishna wants Arjuna and us, the listeners, to think about. This idea that the soul goes on, it's key, because it sets up one of the most crucial ideas in the Bhagavad Gita, karma yoga.
All right, let's break that down. What exactly is karma yoga?
It's essentially the yoga of action, right? It's all about acting according to your duty, what Krishna calls dharma. But here's the thing, without getting attached to the results.
So it's not about being passive or avoiding action altogether. It's about how we approach our actions, right?
Exactly, how we approach it all. In chapter 2, verse 47, Krishna makes this famous statement, "You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty."
It's like saying, do your best, don't sweat the outcome.
You got it.
Flow.
Like, imagine a musician, right?
Yeah.
They're pouring their heart into writing a song. A true karma yogi wouldn't be stressing about whether that song becomes a hit or not. No. Their focus is on the act of creating itself, expressing their art.
Makes sense. But if I'm being honest, detaching from outcomes like that seems tough, like superhuman almost.
Yeah.
Especially when those outcomes matter so much to us. How do we even start to cultivate that level of detachment?
That's where Krishna gives us this framework. It helps us understand how our actions are influenced, and how we can start to detach. He introduces this idea of the three gunas. They're like these qualities of nature that are woven through everything that exists.
Okay, the three gunas. I've heard of this concept before, but I'm still not quite getting it. How do they work exactly? And how do they affect our actions?
Think of these gunas kind of like forces, They color how we see things and what motivates us to do stuff. The first one, sattva, it's all about goodness, purity, wisdom, that kind of thing. Actions driven by sattva tend to bring peace, harmony, and a sense of clarity. You know what I mean?
So like someone acting from sattva might focus on helping people. or
Yeah.
seeking knowledge, or just like appreciating beauty around them.
Exactly. Now, the second guna is rajas. It's passion, energy, action. Rajas is what drives us to achieve things, to
Mm.
create, to build. It can be a really powerful force, but when it gets out of control, it can lead to problems like restlessness, anxiety, and yeah, getting too attached to results.
Ah, so Rajas can be a bit of a double-edged sword, huh? Like it's the
Yeah.
fuel for our ambitions, but it can also trap us in this cycle of always wanting more.
You got it. It's that constant chasing, never feeling satisfied. Think of someone who's super ambitious but never content, always chasing the next big thing. That's a Raza's gone wild.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the third one, Tamas? It's usually associated with negativity, right? Like darkness and stuff.
Yeah, tamas is kind of like the opposite of sattva. It's inertia, ignorance, delusion. It shows up as laziness, apathy, negativity, even violence. It clouds our judgment, makes us resist change, and ultimately, it brings suffering.
So if someone's stuck in Tamas, they might feel lost or hopeless, maybe even engage in self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah, that's the danger. And it can be a tough cycle to break. The more we give in to those tamasic thoughts and actions, the more we get sucked in.
This whole idea of the gunas is starting to click now. But how does it relate to karma yoga and that whole detaching from outcomes thing?
Ah, great question. You see, when Rajas or Tamas are running the show, we tend to get way more attached to the results of our actions. It's all about ego, desire, or fear. And that makes it really hard to just let go and focus on doing our best.
So if I'm following you cultivating sattva, that goodness and clarity,
Hmm.
it creates a better inner environment for actually practicing karma yoga, right?
Exactly. When we act from sattva, we're less likely to be driven by ego or attachment. Our focus shifts to what we're doing right now, to serving others, to acting in line with our dharma.
This is fascinating stuff, but also kind of challenging. I mean, we all have these three gunas swirling around inside us. How do we actually shift the balance towards sattva?
Well, it's a process. It's not like flipping a switch. It takes conscious effort. First step is awareness. We got to become more aware of how those gunas are influencing our thoughts, our emotions, how we behave.
So we're like scientists of our own minds, observing these forces at work.
You got it. Once we see the patterns, then we can make different choices. Choices that help us cultivate sattva. For instance, let's say you're spiraling into negative thoughts, or you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated. You might recognize that as tamas.
And what can we do right then to shift that energy?
Simple things can help, like go for a walk in nature, put on some uplifting music, maybe do some yoga. These things can help clear the mental fog and give you a boost.
Good tip. Sounds like even small changes to our routine could make a difference.
Big time. And as you pay more attention, you'll start to see which activities and environments bring out the sattva in you.
Okay, let's say we're getting better at recognizing the gunas, making choices that support sattva. What's next in the karma yoga process?
Krishna really emphasizes aligning our actions with our dharma, our individual purpose. It's like he's saying, find out what you're here to do and do it with your whole heart without getting hung up on the results.
But how do we even know what our dharma is? That's a big question.
It is a big question, but it's also a pretty exciting journey. Krishna suggests that our dharma often reveals itself through our natural talents, things we're naturally drawn to, things that bring us joy.
So it's about paying attention to what feels right to us, what feels fulfilling and meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not fixed. Our dharma can change as we grow and learn. The key is to be open, to listen to that inner guidance, and to be willing to step into the roles that life presents to us.
This is all really insightful. But what about the benefits of practicing karma yoga? What do we get out of it? Why put in all this effort?
I like that question, and Krishna actually addresses that in the Bhagavad Gita. He explains that the folks who are obsessed with the results of their actions, they stay trapped in samsara.
Samsara. You mentioned that before. Remind me what it means again.
Samsara is that cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's like being stuck on a hamster wheel, constantly chasing desires, clinging to things, and going through suffering.
So those who are attached to outcomes are essentially stuck in this cycle.
Right. But for those who practice karma yoga, the ones who surrender their ego and dedicate their actions to something bigger than themselves, they're on a different path.
What's that path like?
It's the path of liberation, of freedom from that cycle of samsara. It's a state of peace, bliss, union with the divine. It's lasting.
Wow, that sounds pretty amazing. But does this liberation happen after we die? Or is it something we can experience while we're still alive?
Ah, no, that's the question, isn't it? It's a question philosophers and spiritual seekers have been asking for a long time, But according to Krishna, the journey to liberation starts right now. It begins with the choices we make today, the actions we take, and the intentions behind those actions.
So it's about inner transformation, not waiting for something external to happen.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process. And the more we cultivate sattva, practice karma yoga, and align our actions with our dharma, the closer we get to that state of liberation.
That's such a powerful message. It's empowering to think that we can shape our own destiny, break free from old patterns and move toward a more peaceful, more fulfilling way of being.
Absolutely. And, there's another interesting aspect of karma yoga. Krishna actually reveals that even those folks who are initially drawn to other gods or different spiritual paths, they're ultimately worshiping him.
Really? I don't get it. What does he mean by that?
He's essentially saying that everyone, no matter what they believe, is searching for the same thing, connection to the divine.
So all roads lead to the same place, even if we take different paths.
Exactly. It's such a beautiful message of inclusion and acceptance. Krishna acknowledges all the diversity of human experience and affirms that there are many paths to the divine.
That's so inspiring. It reminds us that we're all connected, even with all our differences.
Right. And speaking of connection, there's another powerful element in this chapter I think we should revisit. Remember when Krishna shows Arjuna his universal form?
Oh yeah, that scene was incredible and a little scary, to be honest. Still trying to process what it all means.
Well, remember that Arjuna was still caught up in doubt and fear. He couldn't quite grasp what Krishna was teaching him about the nature of reality and the power of the divine.
So Krishna gave him a visual aid, something to really shake things up.
Exactly. By showing Arjuna his universal form, Krishna is revealing his infinite power and majesty. He's showing Arjuna, and all of us really, that there's so much more to reality than we can even comprehend with our senses and our minds.
So it's like a way to expand our awareness, to push past the limits of how we normally see things.
You got it. It's a reminder that the divine is in every aspect of existence, the light and the dark, the creative and the destructive.
That's a powerful concept to wrap your head around. No wonder Arjuna was so overwhelmed.
He was. But that experience ultimately transforms him. He surrenders to Krishna's guidance and finds the strength to fulfill his dharma.
It's a good reminder for us too, right? That even when we're filled with doubt and fear, we can find comfort and guidance when we connect to something greater than ourselves.
Absolutely. And the way Krishna reveals his universal form is interesting too. It's a personal experience just for Arjuna. It's not something he shares with everyone.
Why not? Why keep it secret?
Well, Krishna says that not everyone is ready for that kind of experience. He tells Arjuna that only those who are pure in heart, the ones truly devoted to him, can handle seeing his universal form.
So it's like a special revelation, only for those who have proven their devotion.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that the spiritual path is about getting closer to the divine. As we purify our hearts and minds and our devotion grows, we become more open to these higher spiritual experiences.
This is all so profound. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of this chapter. I'm also curious, how does it all fit into the rest of the Bhagavad Gita? Where do we go from here?
That's the perfect question, and it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We're back, ready to wrap up our exploration of Chapter 4, Karma Yoga Action in Consciousness.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From Arjuna's despair to that deep dive into karma yoga, all the way to Krishna's universal form.
It has. But I gotta admit, I'm still trying to piece it all together. How does it all fit into the bigger picture of the Bhagavad Gita?
That's where the real magic of this chapter lies, I think. It's not just a bunch of teachings. It's like a guide, a roadmap for a total shift in how we see the world.
So it's not just about getting the concepts intellectually. It's about actually living them, embodying them.
Exactly. Krishna is guiding Arjuna and us too toward this big realization. Everything is connected. He's showing that even our smallest actions, they have consequences. Consequences that go way beyond what we can immediately see.
Like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
But on a cosmic scale. Our choices, our intentions, they all have an impact.
Perfect analogy. And that's the core of karma yoga, isn't it? It's not about giving up on action, but about acting with awareness, with intention, and with this deep sense of responsibility for the consequences of what we choose.
Makes sense. But to be honest, that can feel kind of overwhelming. How do we even cultivate that level of awareness in our everyday lives? There's so much going on, so many distractions.
Remember those gunas we talked about? Sattva, rajas, and tamas? They're not just ideas. They're forces that are shaping our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions all the time. By understanding them, we can make choices that lead us toward a clearer, more peaceful state of mind.
Right. Sattva is that goodness, rajas is the passion, and tamas is that darkness and inertia. But how do we actually apply that knowledge in our lives?
Start by paying attention. Become more mindful of what's going on inside you. Feeling agitated, restless. Maybe Rajas is calling the shots. Feeling sluggish and unmotivated. That could be tamas taking over.
So it's like we're observing our own internal weather patterns, noticing those shifts, even the subtle ones.
Exactly. Once we're aware, then we can make choices that nurture sattva. Feeling overwhelmed by rajas, maybe step back, take some deep breaths, connect with nature. If tamas is fogging up your mind, maybe move your body, listen to some upbeat music, or do something creative.
Seems like small, mindful adjustments can have a big impact.
Totally. As you practice this, you'll naturally find yourself drawn to things that support your growth and well-being.
So cultivating sattva becomes a way of life.
You got it. And it makes practicing karma yoga much easier. Because when we're rooted in sattva, we're less driven by ego, less attached to the outcome. We can act from a place of clarity, purpose, and service.
I love that. It's like karma yoga isn't about chasing some reward in the future. It's about finding fulfillment right now, in this moment, in living in alignment with our dharma.
Beautiful way to put it. And Krishna actually reminds us that this path, this journey of self-transformation, it leads to liberation. He says, as a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. That's chapter 4, verse 37.
Hold on. So he's saying that through knowledge and right action, we can break free from that cycle of karma.
Exactly. He goes on to say, those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Verse 38.
There's so much hope in that message. Liberation, that state of peace and freedom, it's not some distant goal. It's attainable right here, right now.
And it starts with those little choices we make every day. Do we act out of love or fear? Do we cling to results or let go and trust the flow of life? These choices shape who we become.
It's both empowering and a little scary. We have so much power, so much responsibility for our own spiritual growth.
It is. But that's what makes the Bhagavad Gita so powerful. It doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. It gives us a framework, a way to navigate these challenges and ultimately find out who we truly are.
And speaking of finding ourselves, remember how Krishna revealed his universal form to Arjuna? It was like a glimpse into the vastness of everything and how interconnected we all are.
That's such a pivotal moment. It reminds us that reality is way bigger than we can imagine, and that we're all part of something much greater than ourselves.
It's like Krishna was saying, hey, zoom out for a minute, look at the bigger picture. You're not just this limited, separate self. You're part of this incredible cosmic dance.
Exactly. And when we see things that way, when we realize our connection to all beings, it becomes easier to let go of ego, to be more compassionate, to act in service to a greater purpose.
It's a big shift in how we see the world, one that can spread outward, creating a more harmonious and loving world for everyone.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into karma yoga action and consciousness, I want to emphasize that this is just the beginning. The Bhagavad Gita is full of wisdom, wisdom that we can keep unpacking, keep reflecting on, and keep embodying throughout our lives.
It's a book we can come back to again and again, always finding new insights, new inspiration.
Absolutely. I encourage you to keep exploring the teachings, dive deeper into those mysteries, discover how its wisdom can transform your life.
And if you want to keep exploring with us, make sure you subscribe to Heart Sutra. We'll be back with more deep dives into the Bhagavad Gita and other fascinating spiritual texts.
Until then, may you find peace, clarity, and purpose on your journey.